What's up, everybody? It's Nick with the Galactic Gonks, Star Wars Unlimited competitive team. Welcome to our channel where we talk about Star Wars Unlimited and all things Star Wars. Today, I'll be bringing you a Admiral Piett deck tech video from the new Set 4 Jump to Lightspeed. So, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first things first, we're going to talk about Admiral Piett. Admiral Piett is a new leader with Set 4 Jump to Lightspeed. He is an Imperial official command villainy leader. His action is to exhaust this leader and play a capital ship unit from your hand. It costs one less. When he is deployed to the ground side, he costs 5 resources to deploy. He has 2 power, 7 HP, and each capital ship unit you play costs 2 less. So with this deck tech video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down 3 things that you're going to need no matter what version of Piett you play, whether that's aggression, whether it's cunning, it doesn't matter. First thing we're going to talk about is ramp. Second thing we're going to talk about is capital ships, which is what Piett's all about, is bringing out those capital ships. And then the third thing we're going to talk about are 3 events that I think you need in every Piett deck. And then I'll show you kind of what I'm brewing up at the end. And I'll talk about which cards I believe you should include and the pros and cons of each. So, starting off with ramp. So, for those of you that may be new to trading card games, ramp is when you are trying to gain resources quickly, typically to outpace your opponent and gain more resources than they have. Because you want to get out ahead of them to flip your leader early or play some big unit or something like that. So here you can see we have 2 cards. One of them is Super Laser Technician, which has been a staple in ramp decks since this game began, and Resupply, which is another one that's been around since set 1. Super Laser Technician, 3 drop, 2 power, 1 HP. When he's defeated, you get to put him in as an active resource, a readied resource rather. Always been a great card in every villainy ramp deck. The thing that I would caution you on when using him in Piett is with this new set, most people are playing in space. So if you play this unit, you have to have an opponent to attack in the ground unit to defeat it. Otherwise, you have to build your Piett deck with some sort of removal, whether that is Merciless Contest or Open Fire, Force Choke, things like that. So keep that in mind if you're going to use this in Piett. You may not run into a ground unit. Resupply is an event that costs 3. This is a really safe card. If you have this in your hand on turn 2, you're in great shape. The only thing that can stop you here is hand disruption. So somebody like playing Spark of Rebellion or playing a Bazine that can remove this at the beginning of the game. But other than that, Resupply is a must-have in your Piett deck to help you ramp. Next up, we have an upgrade in an event. The upgrade is priced on your head. Ideally, with this card, you would want to play it turn 1 on an opposing unit, and then when you defeat that unit, you get the bounty, which allows you to put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. So some pros and cons here. Pro, you get to play it on turn 1. Turn 2, you're destroying a unit and ramping. Con here would be that you play this on turn 1, hoping to destroy a unit, and you're doing that through some sort of removal, whether it's Merciless Contest or it's Open Fire, and your opponent buffs their unit. Which this is the set of upgrades, so it's very likely that they put a small space unit out. You place price on your head on that unit, and then the next turn they have buffed that unit to where it now has 5 HP, and your open fire doesn't do anything. Merciless Contest is a safe bet here because you're going to get to destroy it there. Just some caution. I run this in my deck, but it's definitely something you can run into. if you're not properly building your deck. And then command, really, I'm not going to touch too much on command. It's a great card. It allows you to ramp and do some other things. You can see you can give 2 experience to a unit. You can deal damage to a non-unique enemy, and you can return a unit from your discard pile. The issue here is if you're building a Piett mono command deck, excellent card, got to be in there. If you're building a Piett aggression or any other aspect, this card costs 6 because of the aspect penalty. And at that point, you're just double ramping, or you're late game ramping. If your initial ramp is with this card and you had to pay 6 to play it, you've already been able to do Piett's epic action for 5. So, not a very useful card for the early game ramp that we're trying to achieve with Piett, but it can definitely be a useful card later for double ramping, or like I said, if you're building a mono deck, card to use. All right, these 2 next ones are cards that we can use to ramp, but they also happen to be capital ships. So you'll see in my capital ship segment them mentioned again. But first is Resupply Carrier. It's a new capital ship space unit that we have with this set. It costs 6 resources, and when played, you get to put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. So pros here, it's a capital ship. So with Piett, we get to play it for 5 if Piett is not flipped. And that allows us to ramp 5 HP on turn 4 is not too bad in space, but at that point, our opponent probably has something bigger or multiple units out. So I think the con here is that if you are using this for early game ramp, it's not the card for you. If your first ramp is playing this card, again, you could have played something else like Gladiator, Star Destroyer, or Ruthless Raider, or any of the other 6-drop or 5-drop capital ships. Now, if your goal is to use this to double ramp, hey, this is the card. It's a great card. It's been in my build so far, just simply because it is another 4 or 5 ship that I could play, worst case scenario. And if Piett's flipped, it's a 4-drop. So, not a bad card. It's just, I think you have to know what you want to do and what you're trying to achieve with this card. It's not really beneficial for the early game ramp, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here in this section. Same thing with Arcotins. Excellent card. Even if it didn't ramp, with Piett, you're getting to play this card for 6 if he's flipped, 7 if he's not. 7 power, 8 HP. It's a beefy unit. When you're talking about Piett and playing it early, it ambushes, and when it attacks and defeats a unit, you get to ramp with it. So this is a card that has multiple uses. I think this is a necessary card in your Piett deck. Maybe a 2 of, maybe a 3 depending on the deck if it's an aggression deck. The double ramp is great here, the late game ramp, but there's not a lot of units that this isn't coming out and wiping off the board. I know we've got the upgrade with the pilots and everything, and there may be units it can't take out. But for the most part, this is going to get to remove a unit from the board for you. And again, you're going to get to double ramp and bring out some of your bigger ships with Piett later. So definitely a great card to have. And then finally, we have Cham Syndulla. This is our first aggression ramp card with this new set. 4-drop, 5 power, 4 HP, Rebel Twi'lek. When played, if an opponent controls more resources than you, you may put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. Now, again, this is not going to be a card that helps you ramp, but it could be a card that helps you ramp back into where you need to be. So if you're playing somebody like Han, who's disrupted your ramp, or if you're playing another player that's playing a Piett, Palpatine, Krennic, or something like that that is also trying to ramp and they've outramped you, this can be a great card to help you catch up to where you need to be. And worst case scenario, if you don't use it to ramp, it's a pretty beefy 4-drop. I mean, it's got 5 power and 4 HP, and not a lot of people are playing in the ground. So you can keep this in your aggression deck. I haven't tested it myself. It may not be worth it, but I think just based on the stat line and what it does for you, the many options, it's definitely a card to consider in an aggression deck. All right, so now we're going to get into capital ships. So we're going to start off with Outlaw Corona. 3 drop, 3/5. It has a bounty on it, so your opponent will get to ramp themselves because when this unit is defeated, your opponent can claim the bounty and put the top card of the deck into play as a resource. Now, a lot of people don't want to run this card in their Piett deck because of that very thing. I kind of feel the opposite. This card with Piett, you can play on turn 1. A 3/5 in space on turn 1 is a beefy unit. Yes, it lets your opponent ramp, but to be honest, Piett's flipping on 5. So I don't really necessarily care if my opponent gets to ramp with this because in my mind, they went after this card to kill it with a 5 HP stat line, turn 1, turn 2. They had to waste a unit or two or an event to do that, and they didn't damage my base. And that gives me more time to do my ramp and to get to my big capital ships. So I like this card in the Piett deck. Gladiator Star Destroyer, I feel like this is a necessary card in the Piett deck. It may not be a 3 copy necessary, maybe a 2, but you're getting to play it for 5. So if you ramped, you're getting to play this on turn 3. So a turn 3 Gladiator with 5 power, 6 HP, and you're getting to give a unit Sentinel. I think that's huge on turn 3. That's hard to deal with. So um, not only that, but later, mid game, late game, this can come out and disrupt your opponent, keep some damage off your base while you get to something else. So definitely think you got to have the Gladiator in there. All right, these two are brand new. I haven't got to test them. You can see the deck images aren't that great because they're just snapshots from people opening packs. But the Dornian gunship is a 4/6 stat line, 5 drop. When played, deal indirect damage to a player equal to the number of vehicle units you control. It's a rebel, it's a vehicle, it's a capital ship. Here's where I really like this card, and I think that this is going to be a card that you need to run in Piett. As a 5 cost, if you fail to ramp, you get to play this on turn 3. So, let me back up and say, not if you fail to ramp, but when you fail to ramp, because it will happen. Um, you're still safe. On turn 3, you're playing a card that has 4 power, 6 HP. That's hard to deal with. And if you played something like Outlaw Corona on turn 1, you're getting to deal indirect damage when you come in as well. So I'm excited about this card. I'm glad that they kept it command only as a rebel so I can play it. MC30, same story. It has Overwhelm and Raid 1. I mean, on turn 3, if you failed to ramp, you're getting to play a 5/5/5 in space with Raid 1 and Overwhelm. So you're slamming into their 3 HP small unit and doing 2 Overwhelm and still living. Or 3 Overwhelm with the Raid 1. So I think this is an excellent card. I think it's going to be a must. I think both of these cards, not both of them at the same time, I think it's one or the other in that slot, but these are musts in the Piett deck, in my opinion. Maybe I'll have my mind changed when we actually get to test them, but just looking at them and knowing what I'm doing with them, I think you have to have them in the Piett deck. We already talked about these two. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I just wanted to mention them in this section and remind you they are capital ships. All right, the big guns. All right, so Relentless. Let's talk about it first. 9 drop, 8 power, 8 HP. First event played by each opponent. Each round loses all abilities. Huge card. You got to have this card in your Piett deck. No questions about it. You don't have to have it main decked, but if you don't have it main decked, it's got to be in your sideboard. If it's not in your sideboard, it's got to be in your main deck. I run it in the sideboard. I prefer to run other cards. I'm mainly running an aggression deck. You'll see later. And I keep it in my sideboard for the mill decks. When you're playing the hard control players, you sub this card in and disrupt those events. So great stat line. You're getting to play it early with Piett's abilities, and you're stopping the events. So got to have this card. And then Devastator, all-time favorite card right now. Maybe my mind will be changed after this set, but 10 drops. So with Piett, you could potentially play it for 8 resources if he's out on the board. 10 power, 10 HP, Sentinel, Overwhelm, and you're dealing damage equal to the amount of resources you have. So you have to have this card in Piett. No questions asked. Doesn't matter I think the only time you get away with not having this in is if you're running a Vigilance deck, and then even then, I think it's a sideboard card for sure. But it's just too big and too nasty. I mean, it's devastating, like its name says, when it comes in. And Piett being able to play this on turn, what is it, turn six, I believe, if my on the fly math is correct, is nasty. So, got to have Devastator in there. And then Finalizer, um, not a big useful card, in my opinion, up until now. I think with Piet's ability to play it cheaper and being able to play it for 9 does bring some relevance to it. 11 power, 11 HP. When played, you get to capture a unit for each unit you have, essentially. So this can definitely save your bacon. Hopefully, you built your deck to where if you get to this point in the game, you're winning another way with some of your other bigger ships. But I can definitely see this being not only a beefy ship to play for 9 resources, but somebody that's got a lot of units out on the board against you. Hopefully, you've got one or two out there, and you can disrupt them by capturing them. All right, so now let's talk about aggression. These are the only two capital ships in aggression: Ruthless Raider and the new Devastator. We all know Raider, 6 drop, 4 power, 6 HP. When played and defeated, deal 2 damage to a base and 2 damage to an enemy. If you're running an aggression Piet, this card's got to be in there, no questions asked. Um, the new Devastator, same thing. You've got to have this in your aggression Piet deck. Not only because it's a beefy space unit with a 9 power 6 HP stat line, but you're dealing 4 damage on entry when played. So probably removing a unit. You get to assign that damage, so maybe more than one if there's damaged units on board. And then while it's on the board, you get to control all your indirect damage. So if you're playing a card like Planetary Bombardment, you're doing 12 damage however you see fit to your enemy. So they have to deal with this card. So worst case scenario, you play it, they exhaust all their enemy resources to defeat it. They're not damaging your base, right? And if they leave it alone, they're going to pay for it when you play Planetary Bombardment. So this card's got to be in your Aggression Piet deck. All right, let's talk about Vigilance a little bit. Munificent Frigate. You can see I got the best image I could find. It's that new. 5 drop, 4/7. Definitely a card to consider. I mean, again, this is being a 5 cost. If you failed to ramp, you're playing it on turn 3 with Piet. 4 power is not that awesome, but 7 HP, hard to deal with. So I mean, you could definitely overwhelming barrage onto this, put a pilot onto this, beef it up even more, make it hard to deal with for your opponent. So definitely one to consider. I wouldn't say it's a must-have right now, but definitely something to look at. All right, these two guys. So both of these are new cards to set 4. Um, we have Corvus, which is a 5 cost, uh, 4 power, 5 HP, restore 2, and when you play it, if you have a pilot or an upgrade on the field, you get to attach it to this unit. Got to have this in a blue Piet deck. No questions asked. This is a card, it's a 5 cost, so if you fail to ramp, you get to play it on turn 3. Later game, you're playing this for potentially 3 resources. Um, and it's just too good. It does too many things, and it's powerful enough to remove units. It's big enough to stick around, being a played on turn 3, and then you're restoring 2 and getting that restore off of it. So if you build this correctly and you build it maybe with a couple pilots as well, this can be a card to definitely have to worry about. And then you got the CR90 Relief Runner. Really excited about this one. 6 drops, so if you ramp turn 3, if not turn 4, it has Restore 2 as well. 6 HP on this one, so slightly harder to deal with. And then when defeated, heal 3 damage from a unit or base. You're going to see my build a little later, but not only has this got Restore 2, if you play it on turn 4, um, you're getting turn 3 or turn 4. You've got a pretty beefy ship to deal with, and you're going to at least get to restore 2 off of it at least once. Um, and if they use removal on you, if you're playing a control deck, you're getting heal 3. So great card. Got to have it in that blue Piet deck. All right, these two are special. So I grouped them together because it depends on how you build your deck of whether or not these are going to be necessities. So Chimera, 6 cost, potentially playing it on turn 3, 5 power, 6 HP. When played, you may use a when defeated ability on another unit. So just like we talked about with CR90 Relief Runner, you've got this out on the board on turn 3. Hey, turn 4 comes, we play Chimera. We get to heal 3 just for playing Chimera. So definitely something to consider. And then when it's defeated, it creates a couple TIE Fighter tokens. Fleet Interdictor, same thing. It's got a when defeated ability. So you can see where like my mind's going here is, we play CR90 Relief Runner, we play Chimera, we have Fleet Interdictor on the field, we play Chimera, and we get to utilize these when defeated abilities. So if we talk about Fleet Interdictor, 7 drop, potentially playing it for 6 or for 5, depending on Piett and where he's at on the field. 6 power, 6 HP. You're getting a Sentinel out of it, and you're getting to remove a space unit that costs 3 or less. Most of these new leaders are beefing up smaller units, so you play it, you get to remove one of those. And like I said, you pair it with something like Chimera, you play a Chimera, you remove another one. They're not dependent on each other by any means. I'm just trying to show the connection and the synergy there. I think that Fleet Interdictor has a place in your Piett Blue deck on its own. I think Chimera is more um, dependent on whether or not you're going to try to feed off of that when defeated abilities. If you're not running cards with the when defeated, I think there's better cards than Chimera out there. Speaking of which, these two guys. All right, so the big guns of Vigilance, Avenger. I think it goes without saying. If you're running a Piett Vigilance deck, you got to have Avenger in it. I mean, when a played on attack, you're removing a non-leader unit. Wild. Playing it for potentially 7 resources. It's an 8 power, 8 HP. Avenger comes on the deck. People got to do something about it. They can't just let it sit there. They can't just let it play. Worst case, you come in, it removes a unit, and it gets removed by a control deck. Big deal. You just removed a unit and your Piett, so you probably have another one where you got Annihilator or something there. So got to be a 3, in my opinion, a 3 copies. Got to be in there. To me, a Piett Blue deck, this is probably the bread and butter of a Piett Blue deck. So next to it, we got Annihilator. Haven't got to test it. Just kind of thinking about what it does. Again, with Piett, if Piett's on the field, we're playing this for 9. That's big. That's a game closer for me. And then it's got a win defeated ability. Now, you're not going to feed off a Chimera with this because if it's on the field, you've probably won the game. But you'll see here in a minute, we've got cards like Director Krennic that reduce the cost of when defeated cards. So now you play a Director Krennic. This is now a 10 drop. Piett's on the board. Now it's an 8 drop. For 8 resources, you play an Annihilator. I say it's hard for you to lose that game, especially with all the other cards you have in the deck. So definitely one to look out for. Definitely one to consider. It is very big, so I'm not saying you have to run it in there, but it's definitely one to think about. Maybe a one of at minimum. I'm probably going to run more than that. All right, let's talk about cunning. So corporate light cruiser, 6 drop, 4 power, 6 HP, ambush and raid 1. Don't know much about it right now. You can see bad deck image there because it's so new. It was leaked. I think this is definitely a card to consider in a cunning deck. I mean, you've got a lot of green that we already talked about, so it may not be the best card, but it does have the ambush capability early on, earlier than Architins. So it could definitely be something you want to consider there, as well as if you're going to pair it with Triple Dark Raid or something like that. I can definitely see this being a useful card. Radiant 7. I think this one's a must-have in a yellow Piett deck. 7 drops, so potentially playing it for 5. Each enemy non-leader unit gets -1 for each damage on it. Man. So if you came in with an overwhelming barrage or a turbo laser salvo or something like that, and everybody on the field has damage, you play this card and you're dealing 5 indirect when you play it, and then everybody's got a -1 for all their damage. To me, it's a no-brainer. Piett, capital ship, you got to have this one in there. All right, these two are um, both included in the cunning section. I know Gideon's is just villainy, but um, I think that Gideon's light cruiser is a good capital ship with a good stat line. It's got 7 power, 8 HP. It costs 8, so potentially you can play it for 6 with Piett. It has overwhelm. And then we have the new Moff Gideon unit card that is yellow cunning, and he's nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, he's not a bad unit. So pairing it with that unit, I think that you have the capability here to do some real damage. And like I said, worst case scenario, Gideon's not on the board or you're not playing Gideon. You've got a light cruiser here with a 7-8 stat line and overwhelm. You're pairing that with OB. Um, it's doing some damage and it's a early played cruiser. So I think it's got multiple benefits and definitely want to consider in your cunning deck and really in any of them, just because it's a good capital ship. But I think it's going to be probably more towards that pairing with Moff Gideon synergy, because we do have other cards with similar stat lines like Architons. And then Chimera, slept on card in my opinion. I know a buddy that plays this. Actually, one of my teammates plays this, John. You know, it's an 8 drop card, 8 power, 7 HP, and it comes in shielded. So it's a beast coming in on its own. And then you get to name a card. And here's the thing, you don't have to know what card they have in their hand because they're going to show you their hand. So you're playing a large capital ship that's shielded, hard to deal with unless you have removal, and you're getting to see your opponent's hand. So I think if you're building a cunning Piett deck, you have to have Chimera in there. Just name a card. It doesn't matter. You get to look at their hand. And look, if they have that card in their hand, they have to discard it. So great card, very slept on, even without this set. You got to have Chimera in your yellow Piett deck. All right, these next couple I've kind of left in their own category. So the Quasar TIE Carrier, 6 drop, 5 power, 7 HP. You're creating a TIE fighter on attack. Um, I don't know. For Piett, I don't think it's a very viable card. It is a capital ship. You can play it early, but all it does is create a TIE fighter. And for a 5/7 stat line, we have several other cards I've just mentioned that are better than that. If you're creating a Piett deck that is unique to TIE fighter tokens, though, and you're trying to buff those tokens or something like that, definitely look at this card. Same kind of story with Executor. It's 11 drops, so you could potentially play it for 9. Um, you could play it with Director Krennic unit and play it for 8, which would be pretty cool. And it is a 12/12, but it's creating 3 TIE Fighter tokens every time you play it, attack with it, and defeat it. You know, hopefully, I feel like at this point in the game, if you're playing this card, you're not relying on those TIE Fighter tokens. They're there, they're adding damage, don't get me wrong. And, you know, I just think we have other cards like Devastator that do much more that cost less. Now, if you're building this with the synergy of, like, say, you know, playing it earlier with the Director Krennic unit or creating TIE Fighter tokens to exploit them or something like that, definitely a card to consider. But I don't think that it's going to be a card that is going to keep up with the meta. Just my opinion. All right, Invisible Hand and Invincible. Invisible Hand can definitely be played in the Piett deck, but I think that you have to pay attention to what it does. When it's played and when it completes an attack, you search the top 8 cards of your deck for a droid unit. So you're having to build around that droid synergy. You reveal it and draw it, and then if it costs 2, you get to play it for free. We just saw the vulture swarming vulture droids, which I believe cost 2. This would be an excellent card to pair there. But if you're not going to try to synergize with this card, it's not worth it. There's better cards out there that we just talked about. But if you're going to try to build it around that droid capability, definitely look at this card. Invincible. If you control a unique separatist card, this card costs 1 less. So hey, you can get it out even earlier because of Piett's ability. If you have a separatist on the board, and then if you deploy your leader after it's out, you can return a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less to its owner's hand. So Definitely something to consider for a Piett deck if you're going to synergize with Separatists. All right, Providence Destroyer doesn't require you to synergize with Separatists, even though it's a Separatist card. I did include it kind of in this grouping because of its Separatist keywords. But giving an enemy space unit -2/-2 for this phase is definitely beneficial. It is an 8-drop though, so even with Piett's ability, it's played a little later. Now you can exploit to make that cheaper, but you got to think about what you're doing with your Piett deck. So if you're going to synergize with that exploit capability and put out a bunch of TIE Fighter tokens or create a bunch of battle droids or something like that to exploit this card, great card. Other than that, I'm not trying to sacrifice a big capital ship to exploit this card in earlier. So something to consider. Um, and then the Invisible Hand, when you play it, you create 4 Battle Droid tokens. On attack, exhaust any number of friendly Separatists to deal a damage to the defender's base. Um, again, if you're synergizing with that capability, great card. If not, it's a 4/7 that costs 8. Much better capital ships out there for you to consider. And then Malevolence, hey, I think this has some promise. It is a 9 cost capital ship that's got a 7 power, 7 HP, restores 2. When you play it, give an enemy -4 for the phase, and it can't attack for the phase. Big time card. I mean, you can exploit if you need to, but with Piett's ability, you can play this for 7, and that's pretty good. It's a pretty good card. And if you have something small out, like you'll see my deck, I've got a couple ground units I keep around, like Yularen, maybe a Sentinel. You can get it out even earlier. So Vigilance decks definitely one to consider. However, with its 9 cost and with the awesome blue ships I just showed you, I don't know that it's a you know tier 1 level, let's say, capital ship that I would put in there. But don't sleep on it for sure. All right, so that is all of the capital ships. So now we're going to talk about some events that you must have in your Piett deck. These are no question must haves. We'll start with planetary bombardment. If you're playing Piett aggression, you have to have this in there. You're dealing 8 indirect damage to a player when played. If you control a capital ship, you're dealing 12. So I don't see a lose-lose here at all. You have 6 resources and nothing on the field. You're doing 8 damage to that opponent, whether that's spread out among units, which is beneficial, or straight to the base. I don't see anything wrong with that. If you have a capital ship out, and I'll remind you that Outlaw Corona is a turn 1 capital ship, and if they ignored it or couldn't deal with it, you're doing 12 indirect damage. So you got to have this. If you're Piett aggression, 3 copies, no questions asked. Fight me on it. Overwhelming Barrage. Um, this is like one of the 10 commandments of running a villainous command deck. You got to have it in there. I think with the size of the ships and things, the size of the units you're playing with Piett early game, why not? If on turn 3 you're playing a card that has 4 or 5 power, and on turn 4 you have an overwhelming barrage, you're removing units, and then hitting hard after. So, got to have overwhelming barrage in there on all build types. It doesn't matter what other color you're using, you got to have 3 overwhelming barrage. Now, Turbo Laser Salvo, very OP card. It's devastating. Choose an arena. A friendly space unit deals damage equal to its power to each enemy unit in that arena. Huge, 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 but very situational. So this is a card that can definitely win you the game. It's definitely a card that can get you in out of a bind, especially if you're building a more space-heavy Piett version, and you have an aggro opponent or something like that, and you get to this point, you can remove all those. But I don't think it's necessarily a 3 copies. I run 1 main deck, 1 sideboard. You can do a variation of that, but I definitely think it's something you should have in your deck, or have the capability to put in there. Because again, if you've got that opponent that maybe they sideboard, now they're going directly to ground, hey, here you go, Turbo Laser Salvo, get something out big quick, hit it when you get 7 resources, and remove those units. Okay, so we'll round out the video just kind of showing you what I'm brewing right now. This is my first version of a Piett Red. You can see some of the ships I talked about. We have the Corona in there, Gladiator, Resupply Carrier, Ruthless Raider, Architens, and both Devastators. Um, Kind of talking about synergy here. So, we talked about ramp in the beginning. I've got I've got 11 opportunities to ramp. Um, Price on your head, super laser tech, resupply carrier. Um, I'm hoping to utilize that price in your head in the beginning, turn one, hopefully, and use Merciless Contest or Open Fire to remove whatever unit I upgraded. If I have a super laser tech, I play it on turn two. Worst case scenario, I kill it myself with Merciless Contest and take out one of their units as well. Or, really bad day, I have to kill it with Open Fire. But it's still a ramp option in the beginning. And then resupply goes without saying. Resupply carrier, we talked about it. I run two of. I'm not trying to double ramp. If I do it, it's cool. If not, hey, it's still a 4 or 5 ship if it's the only thing I have in my hand. I have a version 2 I'll show you where I've removed it. And then talking about planetary bombardment, again, we talked about why it's important on its own, but running the new Devastator, I get to assign that damage. So now, if you don't deal with my Devastator, I'm going to play planetary bombardment and I'm going to smack 12 on your base, or I'm going to kill every unit you got with 12 damage, and then probably put some out. What I do want to talk about is something I've seen different from other Piett Red players. I have not completely abandoned the ground unit. A lot of people have. A lot of people have gone straight removal with the open fire, merciless contest, force choke, etc. Um, I've got Yularen in there as a potential turn one play if he's all I got. He's getting ignored a little bit because he's on the ground side and he's not that big a deal. But I'm healing one for every green card I'm playing, green unit rather. Um, and then my sentinel there, hey, that's breaking up. If I am getting hit on the ground side, if I'm playing an aggro player, that can disrupt them a little bit while I get my ramp taken care of to get my big units out or play my overwhelming barrages, etc. And then finally, Maul. I run three of with Maul. I chose him over Vader just simply because I'm not running a bunch of ground units or space units that cost 3 or less. And he's got that 7 HP, 7 power rather. So if I'm playing somebody with a non-pilot unit like I am, another Piett, um, you know, uh, Luke Skywalker, etc., they put them out. I have them all. They may not be expecting it from a Piett deck, and I get to remove that. So that's just kind of what I'm brewing with. You can see my sideboard there. I run, the one turbo laser we talked about. I run my 3 copies of Relentless, 3 copies of Palpatine's Return to help with the control decks. Um, and then a couple copies of Disabling. I'm playing somebody that's really going aggro against me with the pilot upgrades. Got a couple of those to sub in to try to help me slow that down a little bit. And then version 2 is the exact same, except for I subbed out Resupply Carrier with the new capital ship that we talked about. You can see there on the screen. I just felt like, again, I said it several times in the video. Resupply carrier is cool for double ramp, but it's not doing much more for me than that. I've got another ship here with the same stat line coming out a turn earlier and doing damage. So I can't wait to test it. Haven't got to test it out yet. I actually swapped it in before I made the video. I saw it come out on the stream, and I thought I'd share it with you. And then lastly, I wanted to show you what I was cooking up with a blue Piett version. So we have Piett Vigilance here. A couple different things going on. The ramp game, trying to synergize Super Laser Tech, killing it with the Death Trooper's ability when it comes in, hitting it into another unit, of course. Also, I can play Dr. Pershing up there and then play a Super Laser Tech, deal the damage to the super laser tech when I use Pershing's ability to ramp. I have resupply to ramp. But what I think you've noticed here is that I've kind of built this to where if I don't ramp, it's okay. I have a small Sentinel unit that can be played as a pilot later on, which is beneficial. I have Director Krennic, which I'll talk about in just a second. I'm trying to draw cards with Pershing. I'm trying to draw cards with Inferno. I'm trying to pick up some healing with the Brute. So the ramp is nice here, but I wanted to try to design this to where if I didn't ramp, it would be fine. And you've got cards like Corvus that I can play on turn 3 with Piett. I don't need a ramp to play it. Turn 4, I'm already into my 6 cost ships and flipped. So I think I think this is going to be a good build. Obviously, I'm not perfect. I'm going to need to change some things. The thing I'm excited about though is the when defeated abilities. I kind of mentioned them earlier. You're playing Krennic turn 1 if you have them in your hand. I have several things on here like the Tie Brute. Um, got the CR90 Relief Runner. I've got the new Annihilator. So Krennic's allowing me to discount those cards. The capital ship ones are discounted by him and Piett, so they're coming out even earlier. And then, I've got the couple chimeras in there. So, we talked about it. I bring those in. I get to heal off CR90. I get to heal off of the Tie Brute. So just a lot of synergy I tried to build in here. I included Snoke just to try to help me against the people playing a lot of the smaller ships. Hopefully he's removing some things when he comes in. Tried to throw in a little bit of Snow Trooper there to be able to buff some attacks. It may or may not work out. That's the one questionable card I think I have in there. Other than that, pretty standard stuff that falls in line with what I talked about today. I've got my mill defense in the sideboard over there. I've got my a little extra removal, and then a card that I'm really excited about that doubles as a unit, the Pantoran Thief. And then I get to steal one of my opponent's ships, which I'm a huge Palpatine player, so that kind of goes back to my roots there. Get to steal something from you, so really excited about all this. You know, Glad you were here for the video. Hopefully, I helped you out in some way, whether you're a new player or a veteran player. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Let me know if you agree, disagree, if I missed something I didn't think about. Also, let me know what you'd like to see in the future. I plan on doing videos like this, and I know my teammates are as well. So, thank you for stopping by. Please like and subscribe, and check out our channel for more Star Wars Unlimited and Star Wars content.